Joining me now are two veterans serving their country now in Congress. Florida Republican Cory Mills, an Army veteran, and Massachusetts Democrat Seth Moulton, a Marine veteran. Both are on the House Armed Services Committee. Great to have you both today.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so you guys have a lot of things going on, including funding the government when we run out of money, December 20th, if we get to that cliff again. And there are questions. Some in the Senate have raised more funding for Ukraine, and that's something that's being discussed here as well. Reagan National Defense does a survey, and they asked people about this. Now, a majority still support sending weapons and aid to Ukraine, but that number has been dropping. Where do you think that goes?
Well, I think one thing you see in that survey is that people are really concerned about the Pacific, about China, right? And so a lot of Ukraine is, what message does this send to Xi Jinping in China about starting a war of aggression if we let Putin get away with this? So I think we all agree that we want Putin to lose here. We want Ukraine to win. But at the same time, we don't want this to go on forever, you know? And I think there's some common ground there in finding a way to bring this to a close.
So what is the hope for resolution? It sounds like President Zelensky is finally conceding that, okay, maybe there's going to be a conversation about some of this territory, has to be ceded to Russia, but does that only incentivize Putin to do this again?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think that this has been handled wrong since 2014 when it originally kicked off. We have to go all the way back to 1994. We had a nuclear non-proliferation agreement that was called the Budapest Memorandum. The idea was that was to recognize not only the sovereignty, but the actual territory of Ukraine. And the Federation of Russia, the UK, Northern Ireland, the US, and Ukraine were signatories on this. So they're in direct violation of their own international treaty in which they signed. The issue is that we haven't actually tried to enforce this or put teeth around it when it comes to international buy-in. And so I think that since the very beginning, we've slow-walked this. And that's what Seth was talking about just a moment ago, where we understand that we don't want Putin to win this. But we also don't want to continue to spend all of our treasures in the idea of prolonging this war, where originally they wanted AT-4s. Okay, if we finally give them to them, then we finally give them HIMARS, then we finally give them ATACMS. And we've slow-rolled this to be able to be kind of drawn out. And that's not the way that this was supposed to be when it comes to winning a war.
Look, I don't think Putin cares about agreements. We've learned that time and time again. But at the same time, I mean, there have been a lot of decisions that have been the right decisions a few months late, right? And if we want to win the war, that's different than just prolonging it. So, there's an opportunity with the new administration here to make some changes. But we can't just give in to Putin, and I think that's the concern you hear in Congress based on some of Trump's, decisions in the past.
Yeah, well, and so all of this conversation gets back to that idea of spending and how we balance this. The survey here also asked about this. 79% of Americans they surveyed said they favor spending more, increasing military spending, but they are also 69% of them concerned that the national debt will force cuts when it comes to defense spending. We should be more concerned probably about the national debt. We should be talking about it more than we are. But how do we balance those potentially competing interests?
Well, again, this year we hit two pivotal, kind of monumental moments, which is that, one, we're going to spend more in servicing the interest payments on our national debt than our entire armed forces spending. That's a very, very key thing. And so I agree. Our greatest existential threat is certainly our national debt at $36.2 trillion. What we need to be understanding, though, is that there's other areas of government in which we can get rid of some of the frivolous spending. There's other areas of government, which is why Doge is such an important thing with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is to try and get the necessary efficiencies in place, but that's not our military. What we need to be looking at for our military, increasing the quality of life and prioritizing lethality, not prioritizing things like DEI or other things that may be divisive or impact our recruitment efforts, but look at things like providing child care 5 days a week, not 2 days a week. Look at the increase in MilCon VA, where we're increasing the amount of houses on bases and the quality of it to increase the quality of life for our soldiers and our armed forces. These are key and critical things for retention, for recruitment, and also to ensure that our priorities are right on lethality, on the prioritization of our military service members, and what the transition plan is later on.
Well, and coming from a military family, I just want to say I feel that we do need to prioritize our men and women in uniform and their families, because they serve right along with them, too.
That's right. And actually, the budget that Congress passed will increase military pay a lot. So we really are trying to invest in the troops and their families. But let's be honest about the numbers here. I mean, here's the problem. I mean, Trump's budgetary plans, his economic plans, will increase the deficit dramatically. In fact, I think 4 times or 5 times more than Harris has planned. So I don't know how this is going to work out. You're not going to be able to extract the kind of savings that you need to actually balance the budget just from government efficiency. So if we really want to invest more in our national defense, we have to talk seriously about how we're going to pay for that. Now, that means not just expenses, but revenues too. So if Trump does his tax cuts for billionaires, he's not going to have enough money for defense. And that's that's a real trade-off.
Corey's already shaking his head
because the
over
funny
there,
part
so
is
we
they want to talk about the tax cuts for billionaires, but yet what they don't talk about, we received more revenue and tax at $5 trillion than we ever had before. And the idea of sunsetting a policy that allows 21% for corporations to go to 40+%.
But the bottom line is dramatically increased deficit.
Revenue speaks for itself. The dollar speaks for itself. $5 trillion in revenue, never been seen before. All because of Trump's
the deficit went dramatically up with Trump's tax cuts.
So you guys
and it's going to go up again.
You agree on something.
That's just the reality.
Agree on that.
But we have to be serious about this if we're going to pay for our defense.
But let's
it
talk
is
about
important that we
this
invest
too,
in that.
because the Pentagon has failed its 7th audit in a row. I mean, with all the good things that need to be done, we know there's a problem there. Reason Magazine says this: if a private company failed its financial audits year after year with only vague assurances that it would get things under control in a few more years, shareholders would revolt and heads would roll.
I agree. I mean, we've got to have some accountability. And I'll tell you, one of the places that we really can save money within DOD is by investing in the advanced, autonomous, AI-enabled drones and things like that, systems of the future, as opposed to the big, old, heavy, manpower-intensive systems of the past. So what does that mean? We need a lot more drones. We need a lot more missiles. We probably need fewer aircraft carriers. That upsets the people at the Pentagon. They don't like to hear that kind of talk. But if you're serious about investing in the future of deterrence and the future of our military while also making sound financial decisions, those are the kinds of changes that we need to see. We haven't seen enough
and again,
out of the Pentagon.
I agree with that. Autonomous AI entanglement capabilities of a drone. We know what that can do on a battlefield to leave our enemies blind, deaf, and dumb, and we know that's the way of the future. However, when we're looking at the Indo-PACOM strategy, when you're looking at 7th Fleet's actual capabilities, I don't think reducing aircraft carriers or Ohio class and Cleveland class submarines is going to be the answer, especially when we're looking at the future of what would be the unification of Taiwan and what is China's ultimate goal under Xi. And so I think that there's smart ways to do it. But again, to your point, 7 audits have been failed. They have $4 trillion in assets, $4 trillion in liabilities. How they can't come up with a simple solution to be able to get accountability on this is troubling for me. And I think that that's where potentially something that has an external audit, looking at IG to be able to come in as far as the Office of Inspector General to be able to do a more thorough investigation into this, but also holding the flag officers accountable that if you have a certain amount of assets under your responsibility and you can't account for them, why should you be deserving of a promotion or another posting?
Well, and you mentioned Doge earlier, and listen, they say they're going to look at everywhere and every possible expenditure and try to recoup some of this money, find places that there's waste, there's fraud, that kind of thing. Do you think that there will be bipartisan support for some of what Doge finds? I mean, it's up to Congress ultimately. Doge can't do anything unless you guys decide to make some cuts.
That's right, and I think that there will be support for finding efficiencies and cutting waste. I mean, there's no Democrat who just wants government dollars to be wasted. I think it comes down to the details of what they're going to do. Like if they're just going to, dramatically cut programs that invest in our troops, that invest in weapon systems of the future, and that invest in the kinds of things that working families need right here at home, then that's not going to get through Congress. And I think there'll be a lot of Republicans who vote against that stuff too.
All right, look, we end on a moment of agreement. You both agree there is stuff to cut.
To some extent, we have to get cuts. They have to be efficient, and we have to guarantee that. I'm a 10th Amendment absolutist. We have to return power to the states and individuals. We can't keep trying to swallow power in the federal government, and that's part of the problem right now. Federal government needs to be limited in our spending as well.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time in uniform and service, and now in a different form of service.
Thanks for having us.
Good to have you.
Good to see you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.